Everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Buenas and half a day, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for our May General Assembly for Independent Guåhan. My name is Francine Napati, and I'm the co-chair of the Educational Development and Research Committee of Independent Guåhan. And so we like to start off our General Assemblies with the Inifresi. So if you could all just join in. Inifresi, ginani mastaculo.
Mastaculo, gi hanosoku.
Y mastaculum, y corazonhu.
Corazón. Sani mastugo.
Nani
Who fresin myself para
bayo kontehi. Dano dependi. Hinengi. Ikatura. Ilengguan. Yadi. Ihanom. Tani. Tano tumong.
Ni irin Thank you all for joining us today. And so today we'll be going over our topic of generations of land protectors. We'll be honoring our Magat Tautau, Senator Hope Alvarez Cristobal, and we'll have our panelists, Auntie Katherine Mccullum of Nishon Samoro, and then also Maria Hernandez May of Patehi Litekyan. We want to welcome them in joining us, and they'll be talking to us about just the fight for land and to protect land for the last few generations that we've been experiencing here in Guåhan and throughout the Marianas. So for today's agenda, we're going to start off with talking a bit about Independent Guåhan and what Independent Guåhan's about, and then we'll move into the panel. So Independent Guåhan, what we try to do is we want to empower the Chamorro people to reclaim our sovereignty as a nation. Inspired by the strength of our ancestors and with love for future generations, we educate and unify all who call our island home to build a sustainable and prosperous independent future. So now I'd like to turn it over to my co-chair, Victoria Lola Leon Guerrero, and she's going to introduce our Magat Tautau.
Hafidi Todas Hamzu. I am so excited to be here today, particularly on this issue and honoring this person especially. Our Magat Tautau is a series that we've started. We identify heroes in our movement who in many ways live decolonized lives and really value our sovereignty and have fought hard for it. And this woman has always tirelessly fought for the Chamorro people. We wanted to honor her today, particularly on this topic, which we've dedicated to generations of land defenders, right, and land protectors. And so many people don't realize that a lot of us activists and a lot of us who have been called to this movement were called because of the takings of our land and because of the ways in which our lands have been desecrated and how our ancestors' burials have been removed and disrespected. And particularly in the case of Auntie Hope, this is one of the major issues that she and her mother really fought against. And so we thought that in thinking about generations of land protectors, it was really important for us to build a panel of women who basically inherited this struggle from their ancestors who were fighting to protect our lands. And so today we are honoring former Senator Hope Alvarez Cristobal, who many people have come to call Auntie Hope, but who is actually my auntie. Auntie Hope is married to my father's first cousin. So I grew up always really admiring her from a very young age. She's one of the first strong voices that I feel really helped to develop my own consciousness And as I grew into my own voice as a writer and as a journalist, I'll never forget seeing Auntie Hope at her parents-in-law golden anniversary. I think it was at the Hilton. And she came up to me and said that she had read an article I had written in the PDN. And she, was encouraging me to continue to use my voice for good and to use my voice to speak on behalf of our people. And then, as I was just a young teenager at the time, and then as I kind of grew into my own activism and went to the UN for the first time, again, it was Auntie Hope who I called and who I asked for advice. And to this day, she continues to be the Sina that has guided me in this movement. And I'm so blessed to be her niece. And I know that there are many other young people who have similar stories of Auntie Hope giving her time, her ideas, her energy, her stories to fuel our own fire and keep it going. And so I'd like to share a little bit about her. There's so much to share. And thankfully, our government honored her in a resolution. The Guam legislature prepared a resolution about her life. And I wanted to read a little bit from that. Auntie Hope, as I mentioned, was a senator. And in many ways, as the resolution reads, she has become a light in the dark for many people through her tireless efforts in advocating for human rights and justice for the people of Guam. She has committed her life to improving our life, whether it be as an educator, an activist, a community leader, a farmer, and a beauty queen. Many don't realize, but Auntie Hope's activism began when she was Miss Guam, and she traveled the world and learned about all of these organizations that were fighting for the rights of Indigenous peoples. And she was called to fight for our rights and to become one of those early voices that represented us on international stages. She says she credits her strength as a Chamorro woman to two significant women in her life, her mother Francisca and her grandmother Mariquita Quitaguat Flores, whom she lovingly called Mom Flores. Auntie Hope said that these two women embodied Chamorro identity and nurtured and enculturated her in her Chamorro values and practices to become the woman she is today, stating that their alternating role as figureheads in her life was seamless. They ensured that she was in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. And I must say that for me, that is Auntie Hope, always making sure that I too am in the right pace at the right time, doing the right thing. And I feel so blessed to be in that line of women with her. Auntie Hope's underlying source of enduring strength is always her family, her husband Enrico Adrian Cristobal of Timuning, and her 5 wonderful children, Anel, Irisa, Hopi, Maria, and Christian. She's also been blessed with 6 beautiful grandchildren. So she's dedicated her life to her family, her teaching, her farming, and most especially to her activism. She's taken part in many different organizations, often being a founding member of organizations such as the Organization of People for Indigenous Rights, Pata, which was a group that had helped to stop a premature constitution that was designed before our people were able to choose our desired political status. She has always been very vocal about the Chamorro people's right to self-determination. She was a co-founder and dedicated member of the Chamorro Studies Association, the Guåhan Coalition for Peace and Justice, Fuetsan Femalawan, Putehi Litekyan Save Ritidian, and Ihagan Femalawan Guåhan. She is also a distinguished member of our island's commission, our language commission, which is helping our islands to establish an official orthography and ensure that the language and history and culture of the Chamorro people is taught and carried on for generations to come. She has spent over 2 decades representing Guam at the United Nations in various hearings as well, that have taken place in all over the world. Auntie Hope has also represented Guåhan in various women's or international women's organizations, and really has maintained a strong voice for the Chamorro people. I could truly go on and on about Auntie Hope, and I hope that if you'd like to know more, you can visit and read this resolution on the Guam legislature's website. And, you know, she's also helped in many ways to author and contribute to valuable books in the Haleta series. She also helped to author and edit Chamorro Self-Determination, The Right of a People, a publication that is available online. It's a MARC publication available online through Guampedia. So please take a moment if you can to look for some of these resources. And, you know, I'd like to turn it over now to Auntie Hope to be able to share some of her experiences and some of what has motivated her as a land protector. Hafa and welcome, Auntie Hope.
Wow, so just Marcy, Vicky. I'm kind of actually, you know, a little bit reserved about all that you put there because I don't even remember doing any of that stuff. But anyway, yeah, because, you know, time has really gone by and have taken its toll, you know. I'm now 75 years old and just picking up little ailments here and there. But you've asked me to talk or address the issue of land. And at first I said, gee, I'm not qualified to speak on that because I do not have land except for the land on which my house sits on. And I tried to make as much use of this small piece of property by converting the backyard into a small herb farm. As you know, land is usually passed down to the children, and the land that my mom had inherited from her parents, there were just too many of them, not enough to give to all her own children. There were 8 of us, and only 4 were able to get Alabado inherited land in Oddut, and that land was so rich. There was a tributary of the Lonfit River running right to the property, and that river went right to the mountain. We called that the cave in there, and it was where my mother's brothers had fixed a platform of bamboo where they, you know, sought shelter during the war. And of course, the property yielded mandioca, dagu, kamuti, you know, bananas, all kinds of citrus and fruits that grew in abundance at the property. As my grandparents and my mother and her siblings lived off the land. It was a perfect place for farming and even for fishing for itu and uhang and asuli. It was a place of plenty with lots of the material that provided shelter, even bamboo shoots, you know, for food. The hillsides had lots of gadu lohi and gadu palauan, and it flourished beyond the bother of feral swine without that bother. And so this land race provided for my family who depended on everything of that land. Of course, during the war, they were all taken up to Manyangun, which is not foreign to them because that belonged to an extended family, part of our clan, the Alabado clan. And so they knew that area very well. When they came back after the war, they found the land just strewn, graded, full of military. It was a major military dump site, is what it is. And they tried to clear it, of course, not understanding the dangers. There were extended family members that eventually, you know, tried to tap the unspent shells there, and sometimes it would explode. Fortunately, no limbs or lives were lost, but it was a pity. And that the family now had to find ways to generate their sustenance on the land. And so eventually they all lived there, and eventually, you know, the family began to notice health issues. And as a result, just to make long story short, my mom actually succumbed to cancer which we think, came about from all the toxics that were dumped on the family land. My brother died of cancer. I have two brothers that have cancers one has inoperable cancer. My sister had breast cancer. I had breast cancer. And so I think these contaminants contributed, or perhaps, were the cause of our poor health. And so it kind of bothered me that this happened. Our land was adjacent to the ordered dump in August. And so we often walk over to the dump to take a look or pick things out once in a while if there were anything that was salvageable. And so that whole area yielded both bad and good. And it really stayed with me. Once I got married and came back, I realized that the land was unregistered, unsurveyed. So as you know, many of our people pre-World War II owned a lot of land that were not registered or not surveyed because they regarded each other and respected each other's boundaries that were, whether they were imaginary boundaries. And so that was an opportunity, I believe, for the military at the time to scoop up these lands. And so military land takings that occurred post-World War II happened, I believe, that plan was even prior to World War II. And the inventory of the lands that were taken were appended to the Organic Act a month after the Organic Act was signed in October of 1950. And so we could surmise that it's September 1, 1950, all the inventory of the lands that the military wanted was appended to the Organic Act. So the confiscation and the exploitation of our people and on their lands and our natural resources continue today. We now see our coastlines, our fish sustenance, the taking over of Apra Harbor, the taking of our freshwater lake, Fenna, actually the deepest and only largest lake in the whole of Micronesia. The scraping of our pristine forests, over 1,200 acres up at Litekyan, at Magwa, Saban, and Fadang. These were areas where our people gathered. They're referred to, it's nice these days because all these research that are happening are coming up with all these favorite terms. I was talking to a friend in Hawaii the other day, and she says, oh, those are called cultural landscapes and they should be preserved. And I couldn't agree more that we must not stop at the preservation or the protection of our burials in our cultural landscapes, but as well, all that living area that surrounds the various, I call them towns or villages that existed. As you know, the estimates of our people during the 17th century was a lot more than we have today. And so we used high areas, peak areas, say, for example, Ipoh Point. And I was talking to Joe Garrido the other day from Parks and Rec, where I said, he said, that's too far up to be searching for Butun Atulay or Butun Manyohak. And Butu means just the cloud of swarms of the schools of fish that would come in. And these high points were areas that, were important to the lives of our people, just as it is in Magwa. And so I wondered whether the burials there, for example, were our fisher folk that used those high areas to determine when they should get down there and spread the nets or do their tekin and such to exist. And so our lands today, we find that the military has been very creative. All those lands that were taken from us, they continue to find reasons to hang on to the lands, and they have today been very creative. They're creating conservation areas, critical habitat areas, just creative ways to hold on to these lands that originally were taken for, was referred to as national, not national security, something to that effect. But now it has these other necessary, creative, innovative ways of hanging on to our lands. And so as I get older, I'm, over my, especially during the 80s, I experienced all of these, or I saw a lot of desecrations of burials. Everybody knows that our Chamorro people buried our dead on the coastlines. Most of our dead are buried on the coastlines, and because it's easy to do so there. And so I'm sure Litekyan has a lot of burial sites there that are perhaps older than 17th century. But also with the taking of our lands and the holding on to our lands, we find that now not only are they becoming creative onto hanging onto these lands, they have contaminated our lands. There's a lot of toxic contaminations throughout Guam. We see almost when you're driving down Dedido in the back there, or just right up Barrigada Hill, you're going to see a pipeline that crosses. It goes under the road over towards the post office. The jet fuel pipeline from Naval Station all the way to Anderson, that pipeline has leaked over the years and contaminated our soil and our water systems. The military bases at Anderson, but as of about maybe 10 years ago, we realized that Tijan, the old NAS base, had contaminated almost all the water wells that are at the edge of the base, where the sweet areas are, where the wells are, NAS 23. These wells have names: NAS 23, NAS 25, and NAS 1, or A23, A25, and NAS1 were so contaminated with PFAS from firefighting foam that we couldn't drink water from them. They were not safe. They are so toxic. They affect the fetus. They affect our growth. They make us so sick as to kill us. And we, the high incidences of all these major ailments that are they call them communicable diseases. Oh my goodness, I think Guam needs to be a case study just on the toxic waste and how it affects our health. So also, when controlling the lands of our people, who the military was very much the original culprit, because they controlled us post World War II. The U.S. Census shows that our numbers continue to diminish. I would like to just point that out quickly, and thank you for bringing that up. As you can see here, pre-World War II, 1920, 1930, we were 92, 89%, 91% in 1940. By 1950, just, a few short years post-World War II, we were 45%. In 1960, 52%. In 1984, with the security clearance, people were coming in here. So you see the continuing diminishing in terms of numbers for our people. And I would gather that the 2020 census will probably yield a figure less than 37 So the military obviously represents the United States as our administering power here. The system that is the colonial system that is here is really designed and controlled by the United States. And it is our people that benefit the least from their policies. And their aim really in participating at the UN is supposedly to ensure that the programs and policies that they develop protect us while we're watching now the statistics that we are the people that are culturally disintegrating, and we continue to suffer historical disconnection. So no matter the policies, the conventions, all the documents up at the UN, they're there to ensure the programs and policies that are developed for non-self-governing people. Its effects on Guam is the complete opposite. I want to share an old memo that we found. It was in November 21, 1945. And the reason why is because this memo represents the same kind of policies today. And this secret memo was Vice Admiral Murray's memo, where he stated that military control, he said the economic development and administration of relatively few native inhabitants should be subordinate to the real purpose for which the islands are held. Military control of these islands is essential, as their military value far outweighs their economic value. And furthermore, while recognizing Guam's strategic importance, Admiral Murray stated that the island's commercial or industrial value and its resources were of little or no relative importance to the welfare of the U.S. Quote, from the military standpoint, a contented, healthy, and loyal native population contributes a strong link in the strength of those lands as basis. So we all today in 2021 feel this profound impact of Guam's militarization, and it really demands special consideration of almost all local decisions that are made today. I see and feel that we have been irresolute in proceeding forward with our decolonization agenda. We need to be a little bit more aggressive in terms because our people are suffering, our lands are being contaminated. We need to get something together to move forward our decolonization. We need to re-examine the types of engagement, the processes that the military uses today, their NEPA, their EIS processes, all their projects, all their programs. In our situation, decolonial work must be done by us. Our lands may not mean much to the military, but we are the Tautautanó, we are the caretakers of our lands, and we must maintain our rights to our lands. And I'll just kind of close the small presentation today because although, like I said, I don't own much, I really love to see our people in their recreation of our shores, in their recreation of our waterfalls, our forests, in their recreation with, with family members at the beaches. It's just disheartening, and and so I've turned to farming and to watch my plants grow and kind of receive, a little bit of grace from our Creator through the work of, through seeing the plants provide nutrition and sustenance for my own family. So I've kind of like turned in a bit, but honestly, I'm waiting. I think we need to have some big actions. Our leaders need to listen they need to listen. There's all kinds of fora going on out there. Our young, intelligent, energetic people are speaking. We see the resolution on rather the law that was passed on updating our Clean Water Act, the resolution that really promotes our clean water and the maintenance of our northern Guam lands aquifer. We just need to pay attention. Our leaders need to pay attention. I don't get the sense. There's a few others, I can count them on my hand, and most of them are women. Fortunately for us, and we have very strong women in the legislature, but we need more of the legislature, our policymakers, to help us get over this and start addressing our decolonization in a more resolute manner. So yes, it's no more national defense, all these ideas. Back then that's what it was. We were fed with that. And then now we're lost in the live fire range and how important it is. And we have not really addressed decolonization as we should. So just Masi.
Auntie Hope, and you definitely given our audience and even us in independent Guåhan a lot to think about in terms of land and what we can do, not only to protect it, but also what we should do to make sure we develop it and do what's best for our people in terms of the land. So I'd like to introduce our panelists, Auntie Kat. So Katherine Flores Mccullum retired from Guam Memorial Hospital Authority in 2011 as an administrative assistant to the hospital administrator, although since 1973, she held various other positions. She started singing in 1974 and continued up until 1988 as a lounge singer in the hotels at Tomhon. 5 years ago, Auntie Kat was asked to become a part of the entertainment for the war survivors' sentimental journey, since many of the musicians were at one time a part of her past, and asked her to join. She presently sings at Tumon Sands Plaza. She left Guam with her family in 1990 to Japan and came back in 1993 and took up the promise to her dad's mother to fight for family land at Litekyan, or Litekyan. She joined and helped organize various organizations, Litekyan Landowners Association, Guam Ancestral Lands Coalition, which led to meeting Nishon tomorrow. She is presently an artisan crafter at Sagan Couture tomorrow. And through the activism for land return, Auntie Kat became one of the first commissioner of the Guam Ancestral Lands, which established the rules and bylaws in the return of property to the original landowners and their heirs. She continues her membership as the Magahaga of the Nishon tomorrow. Thank you, Auntie Kat, and thank you for joining us.
Hafide, can you hear me now? Okay. The pictures that are depicted here is a part of our past. And our tata is standing right there in the middle. He's reaching for breadfruit. My mom happens to be behind him, and she's holding my sister, Pauline. But these are various pictures in different time frames of our life. And the far corner left, far corner right is a picture of my grandfather and his sons building the prefab home or landsu that we had put together. So in our lifetime, I had never known that our lands were actually under lease condemnation, and we had paraded down to Litekyan by way of hiking, our families would hold together and hike down a steep hill and to come down to our Latsu. In those days, we didn't think about, us being a young child, we didn't think about um, what's the danger of losing our property. All we were thinking about was, hey, we're gonna have fun, and um, it was not fun going downhill. I found out later that my grandfather had tried to build a road going to Litekyan, where he and his wife had actually raised their family, but and almost lost his life. And then immediately after that, the military took over that road. It's as you grow older and you find out all these things, of course, it's going to upset you. Um, I met my husband while I was an odd man operator at Navy. I broke away from Guam Memorial Hospital, and I had left the island to be a singer in Hawaii. My children were not happy, and my mom was very concerned that my children need their mom. So I came back, and I immediately started working for the Navy, or they called it at the time NAFCAMS, which is NICTAMS, and the Navy Communication Station. And so I was still a single woman, and I had dated a commanding officer who was the Naval Facility commander. He took me down to Litekyan, and I was crying my heart out because no, I'm home. And he asked me, why was I crying? I said, because this is our family land and you took it away. And it I just stopped seeing him. I didn't care if he was a commanding officer of the United States. I was just so upset. I just couldn't continue my relationship with him. And so I immediately I found out that NAFCAMS was going through a lot of changes. And so I went back to Guam Memorial Hospital. I was what do you call that? I was a good employee, and so they immediately took me back, and continuing on my employment there was not hard. Then I met, well, during that time I met my husband and at NAFCAMS, and so I ended up dating him for a few years, and then we decided to get married. And but when I brought my husband to meet my grandma and grandpa, they were my grandma was a little bit, she was not really paying attention to what was going on. She just said, she took me aside and she said, Agahu, Atanesti. So she showed me all the pictures of land. I saw maps of Litekyan. And I said, Nana, what are you doing? She said, Nanny girl, we need to have this land back in tomorrow, because my grandma really didn't speak English. And I didn't quite understand what was going on. And when I took the documents home, I read them. And we were leaving in the next few days to go to Japan. My husband was stationed at Yokosuka, Japan. So during the time that we were in Japan, it was 1990 to 1993, there was an incident that happened where Angel Santos and the Nation Tomorrow climbed the fence, and I believe there was a ruckus that had gone on, and a lot of the Chamorros that were stationed in Yokosuka was asked, and that knew me, asked me, is this your relative? And I said, no, I don't know. What is that? And so, of course, I took the newspaper home, read that, and found out that there was some kind of uproar on Guam. And, it was just, it seemed like I was meant to read everything. It was meant to sort of connect. And when we came back, I started my employment back at GMH. I know it sounds like I'm going back and forth, and it's confusing, but I ended up back at GMH, and I continued my retirement. I did break away from GMH. I went to Navy, worked as an Audubon operator. Then I met my husband. Then we got married, left, and then I came back to my employment at Guam Memorial Hospital. And we got together at a family meeting, and I mentioned we lost my grandmother in 1992. She died the day before my birthday, which was November. My birthday is November 2nd, so she passed away November 1st. 1992. And I could never forget what she had asked me to do. It was really, I didn't know how to begin. I didn't know how, what am I going to do? So, we all decided to come together. I got the family together, and my Uncle John, my dad's brother, my dad had taken ill, and he was stuck in bed. He had a bed stroke and lost his movement on his legs. And so my father was constantly on a wheelchair. But Uncle John was always pushing us on to, let's do something. Well, Uncle John had a very breaking story that he told during our testimony at the legislature when we're trying to get our land back. And he had mentioned that he went and fought for, he was drafted to join the military. And when he came back home, he found out that his land was taken away at Litekyan. And so, of course, he didn't want to have anything to do with the military. He was so upset that how dare they. I fought hard. I dedicated myself, and then to find out that our land is gone. And so through those little stories, we built a determination to try and get our land back. We met, I got together with the Ancestral Landowners Coalition, who was headed by the Garrido brothers. I met Joe Garrido and his brother Ben and Patty. I became very close to Patty. And pretty soon we had the Retidian landowners come and join this group. We were also met up with people like the Nimitz Hill families, which they call themselves the Tamfalisa family. And so our organization started growing and growing, and I didn't know the Nation Tomorrow yet. I had not met them. I just heard of them. And I found out later that Patty and her brothers were constantly meeting with the Nation Tomorrow. I was a little afraid to enter into a relationship with the Nation Tomorrow because of, how people, they don't understand what was going on. They only know that this group was spit in Marine's face. And so I was a little bit hesitant about joining their group. They had called us to Litekyan by way of Angel Santos when he became a senator, but it was kind of oddball because the Nation Tomorrow was taking up, they made ranches, they were planting, and and doing all this stuff. And I'm saying, wait a minute, this is our land. What the heck are these people doing here? And so I, in my own way, I had told the Fish and Wildlife when we were introduced to Angel as a senator, and he said, Kathy, you're not getting your land back, because that's what I thought, that Litekyan was supposed to be returned back to our family. And we were so excited, we were so happy. And Angel said, no. What happened was, I think there was a negotiation with Fish and Wildlife to take over this property. And then we met up with these uniform officials that were claiming that they're Fish and Wildlife, and they said that they were going to open the gates for the public. And I said, well, we're part of the public, so as long as you open the gates, we're going to come in. And thus taking up my fight to, as long as the gates were able to access to go into our land, I was not going to let anybody try and kick me out. So we kept on and on. And so we finally got to know the Nation Tomorrow and their true purpose. I had listened to all their stories about what happened at Angel's property, his little girl dying. And so we had a connection, in a sense, to how our property was, because we found out later the military didn't want to return our land because they have millions and millions of dollars buried down at Litekyan. There is cables, buried cables, that is connected from the biggest building there at Litekyan in the ocean that they need to clean up. And so what better way than to keep it from returning back to the original landowners? So I know, I've aged and moved on, and my memory is not as great as it used to be. But I know that through the struggles and the coalition of landowners that have come together, we had opened up the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission, because we were determined to try and convince all the officials that are in the legislature and our governor to try and come together, our congressmen to come together and get these lands back to the original landowners or their heirs. It was a struggle, I'm telling you, to try and open the door and move that thought into everyone's minds that we need to tell the military, hey, if you're not using the land, return it back. It's the return to Litekyan actually blew up, and it was the return of all lands to the original landowners and their heirs. And so I made a dedication to myself that this is not only going to happen at Litekyan, it's going to happen all over our island. We are still having some lands back, returned back to the original landowners. There is, I believe our governor this day has also earmarked some properties that will be returned to the original landowners. But during this time that the time of the firing range and all that, it was a Pandora's box that opened up to other issues that affects everyone on this island. And I kept telling everyone, whenever I get on in front of people, I say it can happen to you. Your own land can be earmarked for a rights of way. And they're going to say, get off the land because we decided we're going to put a road right through your property. Everyone on this island, I don't care what nationality you are, your land is in danger. Your land is in danger of being contaminated or is already contaminated because as far as we know, as Auntie Hope had mentioned earlier, that Naval Air Station was highly contaminated. When we tried to get Naval Air Station back to the original landowners, it was so crazy because people around us were telling us, you can't go into these houses because they have asbestos. And you know what I said to them? What? You mean to tell me you were poisoning your own people? You were poisoning your own people by keeping them in these houses, and then you're telling us we can't go in there because we're going to get poisoned, but yet you continuously poison your own families in these houses? And then everybody started thinking about that. Oh yeah, that was true. We're contaminating our own families. Well, one by one, people started getting sick. The children started getting sick. Cancer started coming into people that used to stay in these homes. But still, the reason why I'm giving about Tizen is because Tizen was my mother's side. And her family got their lands back at Tizen. But yes, we got back highly contaminated lands that were caused by the military. I just have a jarble of so many stories that I decided I need to take a rest. And I'm so glad that Maria has stepped forward and sort of like helped open up Save Litekyan, Save Ritidian, Patehi Litekyan, Save Ritidian. But I know I could probably go on and on, but I think I'd better stop now. And if anyone has any questions.
It's Maasi, Auntie Kat. I always really appreciate your stories and helping people to really understand the importance of your family's land and the struggle. So that said, I'd like to welcome Maria, who Auntie Kat just mentioned, and is pictured here on the far left in this photo with Auntie Kat and her mom and her auntie. And you know, Maria Hernandez is a daughter of Guåhan, mother of 3, and 5th generation descendant of Ritidian landowners. She is a member of Direct Action Environmental and Cultural Advocacy Organization Protehi Litekyan Save Ritidian. PLSR aligns with organizations throughout the Marianas to end the desecration and militarization of indigenous lands. She is also a member of indigenous women-led nonprofit Ihagan Femalawan Guåhan, Daughters of the Women of Guam, which advocates for the social, economic, cultural, spiritual, and political well-being of Chamorro women, girls, and gender diverse people of Guam. Hafide and welcome, Maria.
Buenas, Todo Hamzu. It is truly an honor to be here. I mean, Auntie Kat and Auntie Hope, they really are our Magahagas who are, I mean, they've just paved the way for us to do the work that we're doing today. So grateful to be here. And yes, for those who I've been in a few forums, and so I've shared a little bit about my story, but yes, I'm a 5th generation descendant of Ritidian landowners. And I have a little slide here. It's mostly photos that I'm going to share. One second. Okay, so I really stand on the shoulders of many of my Sina who have been doing this work for decades, and including my amazing, beautiful, strong Auntie Kat, who has always been a fierce protector for not just the return of our land, but for the return of ancestral lands across the island. And it really is her and my mom and so many of my elders who share that strength with me. And I think that's why today, despite having some anxious tendencies, I still find the strength to come out and speak also for the return of our family's land and for the return of ancestral land. So this is my Nana and Tata. They are so cute. And this is my Nana Biha, Anametanani Pangelinan. This is not a very good photo, but we don't have too many photos. I think we kind of have to like scour family records to find our Nana Biha's photos. But so as Auntie Kat had mentioned, you know, it is our Sina who have kind of they've called upon us to continue on the fight. You know, we have so many elders who, to the day they died, fought for their land. And so it really is an obligation of ours now in present day to continue fighting for them. So I just wanted to, usually when I talk about the firing range complex, there's so many complex issues. I mean, I could talk forever about the reasons why the range complex is, you know, not, it's just such a violent project. And I never really get to highlight the specific people who are my elders, who a lot of them have passed away, but they were really our fighters when they were alive, and they really showed up at all the protests and were part of the Camp Out protests. So we have, you know, my Uncle Johnny here in the front. He fought for his whole life. My Auntie Kat, of course, she's not pictured here. I don't think we have a picture with every single one of them, but my Auntie Donnie, I just wanted to mention them because I stand on their shoulders. My Uncle Chris was also a spokesperson for our family. My mom, my family under my great grandma, including my Uncle Botsu, he's Uncle Alfonso Pangelinan, Auntie Pa, Olympia Pangelinan, and then, you know, our family also worked together with some of the other original land-owning families. So there were several in the Castro clans, May Castro, Lou Castro Sablan, and then their siblings. And then the Aguero family, Juan Aguero and Eddie Aguero, were also a big part of the fight for the return of Retidian lands. So I think as a little girl, something that always stuck with me was, you know, at the time I wasn't really entirely sure about what was going on. Obviously, I think I was like maybe 4 or 5. So I only really felt the energy around me and I felt the passion around me. But at the time, I didn't realize that our family was really in the midst of an entire land rights movement. And my mom always stresses to me that it wasn't just our family fighting for our land. She would also bring us to the Harmon Cliff Line protests. You know, Auntie Kat would they were partners in crime. So Auntie Kat would just be like, hey, Lou, come meet me here. And then my mom would just like load us up into her giant white van, because I have 5 brothers, so there's so many of us, and she would just load us up and we would just meet up with Auntie Kat. And one of my favorite stories about Auntie Kat, I just remember that, I mean, she is just an inspiration to me because she is unapologetic about our claim to our land, and I need that energy to keep me going. And so she, one of my favorite stories is she one time drove her truck to Retidian, parked at the gate, and just was like relaxing in her in the back of her pickup, like smoking a cigarette and just not allowing anyone to pass. She was like, this is my land. This is my family's land. And I think that's the kind of energy that I channel when I do this work. And I also, as a little girl, remember, well, we used to do protest camping out at Retidian. And so we would have, most of the family would already be parked at our location. Our family's area where we set up our tents was like properties 7 and 8 down there, the lots there. And so we would have one person that would park outside the gate just to make sure that, you know, if there was an emergency, if somebody needed to run out to the store, there would be a car outside the gate that somebody could drive to wherever. And we just, it was just so normal to me as a little girl, to hop the fence and to pass all of our items. And it just didn't feel weird to us because we did it so much. We basically, I mean, as a girl that young, you would think that the emotions that I would feel in this like pitch black darkness, hopping over a fence, sometimes there's a brown tree snake, and like you would think that there would be a lot of fear inside, but looking back, I don't feel like it was just kind of a sense of calm and peace that we always had as little kids, because there was an understanding, you know, this is our family's land, like there's no reason to be afraid. So that's like kind of a memory or like a feeling that I keep with me. So for those who aren't familiar with our family's history, the Retidian was taken in the 60s by eminent domain, like Auntie Kat had mentioned. And my tata, actually, he had to be taken to court to be paid. He did not want his land to be taken. And there was just constant objections. My Sina really fought to the day they died, as I mentioned, for the return of their land. And then in the 90s, the military deemed the Retidian lands excess, but the government of Guam was thwarted by the US Congress's transfer of those lands to the Fish and Wildlife Service in 2000. And since then, the Retidian lands have been held in trust by the Fish and Wildlife Service. So back then, what we were being told was that, you know, these endangered species were more important than the land being returned to the original landowners. And now what we're seeing and hearing is that a firing range complex is more important than endangered species. So looking back at the 90s and the land being taken away for a second time, it really just feels like, in retrospect, like we were being gaslighted so that the land could just be held in the hands of the federal government instead of being returned. And they were just saying, you know, we have to care for the endangered species. And back at that time, reading old opinion pieces submitted into the newspaper, it was just so amazing to see how many in the community really stood behind the original landowners. Complete strangers would write into the PDN and they would just be like, you know, we can, we care about the endangered species, but who's going to care about the Chamorro people? We're also an endangered species. And it was just really inspiring to read so many entries from people who understood the importance of returning Chamorro lands. And we still, to this day, you know, we have Retidian families also have a lot of support, but it really is a David and Goliath battle. And just legislation at the time, there was a Public Law 22-111, which challenged the Retidian lands being used as a critical habitat or wildlife refuge. And in the legislative intent, it actually stated that, as a matter of record, the people of Guam did not in any way wish any land in Guam to be designated without their consent as a critical habitat or wildlife refuge, and that the action of the executive branch of the government of Guam at the time in approving such a designation was contrary to the best interests of the people of Guam and to their will. And then they also, the 30th Guam legislature passed a resolution 258-30, which opposed the condemnation of the Ritidian land by the federal government for the purposes of the training ranges, and reminded Congress that, quote, the final insult to the people of Guam came when the 385 acres of the former naval facility Guam at Ritidian Point was declared excess in the 90s and was grabbed quietly without fanfare or advance notice by the Fish and Wildlife Service, rather than being returned to the original landowners via the government of Guam. So I think this legislation, it's just so important to have it on record that, you know, it wasn't just our family like begging and pleading. Like at the time, the general understanding by the legislature, by the people of Guam was that that transfer was wrong. So let's see. Yeah, so my personal experience, just I feel like the Camp Out protests really follow me to this day. I think it was really important and pivotal that my mom brought me and my brothers to every public hearing. My cousin Auntie Kat's son Stephen also is in the photos. Here are some photos of my family. Just my tata on the right, and then my my family set up at the beach here. This is me as a little girl in the sand, and all of us, me and my cousins and my brothers, playing in the sand. And at the time, we didn't even really know that we were in the middle of this giant, massive land movement. So yeah, this is a really cool image that I like to share just because it brings a lot of the issues together. And so I'm a core member of Putahi Litekyan Save Ritidian. And, you know, one of the reasons why I find it so important to name my Sina and my elders who came before me, you know, it's because I do truly feel like we are Sina led. We are led by our ancestors, those who have passed on. A lot of the time when we're doing our organizing, certain things happen that can't just be coincidences. And we're kind of, you know, in our brainstorming are led to turn one or to make a decision that leads us down one path. And then that path turns out to be, you know, the right choice. And yeah, so very grateful to my sisters in Putahi Litekyan for all the work that that has been done over the years. We are going into our 5th year. And then before that, I actually was, when the firing range was first being discussed and designated for Paget, I was a reporter at the time. But and I took like my job in being objective really seriously. But what I was doing was I was you know, speaking with the publisher, sharing like Our Islands Are Sacred pamphlets, like, hey, can we sit down and talk about like these points? And attending family meetings, having really hard discussions with my elders, like, I'm a reporter, I can't really speak out, but, you know, I will quit. Like, I will quit so that I can speak out. And they would just kind of, my elders would again guide me and be like, no, you know, we have people who are speaking on behalf of the family, so just do what you're doing. And then that path kind of ended. And I remember there was an event and I was speaking to somebody and I still can't remember who it was, but I was like explaining why I can't really speak out. And they told me straight up, like, just quit. And I was like, whoa, I just didn't even think that would be like something that I would do. But I think in retrospect, because I was in probably my early 20s, I would have, if I had understood the urgency, that I would have done that. But yeah, so when I would attend meetings with my sign, many of whom have passed away, Auntie Kat, you were probably there at everything too. And we would met with Madeline Bordalio. This was in 2015. And one thing that she told us was, you know, she was trying to convince our family that we should just accept the range, because when it's not being used anymore, that we would get our land back. And our family was just really upset by her suggesting that, because we, you know, this is our ancestral land. We don't want it used as a firing range. And a lot of my stoic uncles, they were like in their 60s or 70s, like just seeing them so angry that they were crying in the offices of our leaders and banging their fists on the tables, like that was really left something in me. And then the next day, after that meeting in 2015, I was a UOG student, and I attended an event. Madeline Bordalio was speaking on Retidian lands, and she told everybody in the audience, like, what do you think is going to happen if the landowners get their land back? Do you think they're going to let you on the land? And she didn't realize that I was in the room, and that we had just met with her the day before. She didn't recognize my face. And that was really hard to hear, because I was like, if she's going to say that to a bunch of UOG students, who else is she saying that to? And so I really feel like she was the person who taught me like the difference between somebody who advocates for people and a politician. And so that's something that I just remember her kind of being this, somebody who was trying to play, trying to make it seem like they were on both sides. And I think at this point in advocacy work, with all of the burials that are being disturbed, with our main water source being at risk, like it's not the time to be piggybacking. We need to all just, as a community, come together and continue to fight, because even if a person doesn't care about the cultural background of, you know, like the cultural impacts of built-up construction, if somebody doesn't really care about the environmental effects of built-up construction, we all will be impacted by contaminated water. And so I'm just have like 2 more slides. This is just from the military's own studies that talk about how there will be more harmful effects under the range being built at Northwestfield and Litekyan than under any other alternative. So this is straight from the military's own studies. This is a meme just talking about some of the things that we are protesting when we fight against the range complex. And yes, so protests continue. And yeah, we're just continuing the fight. We have a couple great things that have happened just in recent months. Julian Uggan and Blue Ocean Law really, they worked with Retidian and represented us, and we were able to get the UN Special Rapporteur to write a letter to President Biden. So that's kind of the latest, and hopefully we'll have more updates soon. This is my son on the right, in the middle, and Urs and Jess Nangauta's kids. So that's the next generation. That's hopefully the Retidian thing will not be an issue. Then we can get it back soon. But you know, we're teaching them that it's not just about Retidian, it's about all ancestral land. So these will be the next generation of activists. Situs Mati.
Viva, Caesar Auntie Maria, and Auntie Kat and Auntie Hope. Maria, you can go ahead and close your screen share if you'd like. So I think we'll go ahead and just take a couple questions. We have about 10 more minutes. And then we'll go ahead and wrap up. We just wanted to ask two of the questions that had come in. Honestly, most of what we got tonight was comments thanking all of you and celebrating the incredible work that you are doing, and truly just encouraging you to keep moving forward in your work. The first question that we received was actually for Auntie Hope. Auntie Hope, if you could talk just a little bit about some of the legislation that you passed as a senator addressing land takings and also decolonization, and maybe bring in, some thoughts on what can still be done legislatively. I dispensa, may you kindly unmute? Auntie Hope, your microphone is muted.
Sorry, I said, oh my goodness, it's been ages. One of the first things that occurred when I was in the legislature, by the way, I was only in there for one term, is that I noticed that a lot of our elders were getting their homes foreclosed. And so Priscilla Maanya, who's a brilliant woman who had worked with the indigenous peoples in Guatemala and had come home as a Peace Corps person, we studied this issue and found out that the government of Guam would not lose any more revenues if we had given a tax break to our senior citizens for their primary domiciles. And so that's one of the first pieces that we introduced. We gave them 85% discount on their real estate taxes, so they would not lose their properties and they would not lose their homes. And so in an act to save them from getting all these foreclosures, we introduced that. That was well received by everybody wanted to. At that time, the legislature had 21 members. And I really wish that we could go back to having 21 senators in the legislature, because I feel that we need more representation down there than the few people that are there. We have 15. I just think that we need more voices that have more power there. I'm trying to think back. One of the things that I also introduced is for Guam to claim its EEZ. So at that time, we were looking at international conventions, and we realized that many countries were claiming their 200-mile exclusive economic zone. And so that's what we did. Guam claimed its 200-mile EEZ, and that if we had the infrastructure, that we could make demands of these Chinese trawlers out here reaping the harvest of our fish within our 200-mile EEZ. Just big things, gosh. Yes, I do. Angel Santos' office is contiguous with my office when we were senators at first. So the piece that Angel had introduced, because we actually had one of the very first protests down at Retidian in 1993, when the Secretary of Interior, Assistant Secretary, came out to celebrate giving the people access to the lands in Retidian. We thought, excuse me? Yeah, we got to send a message to this man. I don't know where he came from, but it is not about access or easement. It's about ownership. They need to return the lands to the owners, the original landowners. So we held a protest down there. And if you can, I think you did put up the photos. Doc Torres, who wrote Back to Atate from Malesso. He was in my office just as a consultant. He has since passed away. We had Ron Rivera, who has since passed away, and Ron Tehan, who has since passed away. Many of these activists were part of my office. I was actually propelled into office by the issue of tomorrow's self-determination, of which we for 2 years fought really hard at the international level. And we had already participated prior to that. So yes, you know, one of the things that I regret doing, because I remember Speaker Carlos Taitano telling me, you know, we need to conduct town halls across the US, and we need to educate the media, the national media. We need to get them on our side. It's just, this man was feeling a sense of urgency, and that all the ideas, he was such a great person to talk to. He comes up with these great ideas on how Guam can get mileage, you know, throughout the US by marketing our decolonization efforts and our self-determination push. There was just a lot of, gosh, I'm sorry, I'm kind of drawing a blank, but of course I introduced the Chamorro registry bill so that Chamorros can be registered for cultural purposes. And that was actually received very well by even our print media in Guam. And I believe there was an opinion in the LA Times on that particular piece. I also created the Commission on Decolonization for the implementation of Chamorro self-determination.
Jesus Masi and Si Hope, we know you've done, you know, a lot of work in terms of getting people their land rights and, you know, really working to move that issue forward for our people. So another question that came in is that someone had mentioned that everyone here is really sharing very powerful stories, and so they always knew of the area as Ritidian. So they said that when I visited at the time, I remember my family having nothing pretty to say about Angel Santos, and it didn't sit well with me then. I liked that he was standing up for his beliefs, but I did not want to offend my elders. But now so many people look up to him, and so they're asking, how did this change happen? And how can we have these conversations with our families today?
Wow, Fran, you give me goosebumps because I worked very closely with Angel Santos. A good friend of ours, William Hernandez, who is a very, very strong proponent for, you know, Chamorro self-determination and decolonization. The two of us, because he and Ed Benavente were both arrested climbing over the NAS, the fence at NAS, of which there's no fence there anymore. We were also at the court when he was remanded to, you know, spend time in federal prison. Gosh, when he, you know, we did all kinds of good acts. Angel's whole life is not about Angel Santos. Although he himself, as Marianne mentioned, had lost his daughter when he was at the annex up there, the South, whatever that, you know, I really have a mental block to all of these military garbage going on the island. I look at a person with all their buttons and I tell them how pretty their buttons are on their shirt, but how quickly those buttons could just fall off and there'll be nobodies. You are somebody when you work for your people, when you work beyond your person, when your purpose is not about you. It's about an extension. It's about your people's, you know, great welfare. This man was just so exceptional. And so I remember William and I visiting Jill. Jill, what do we need? We need to raise some funds. We need to get them out of jail. We were raising money for, you know, to get them out. But, you know, another casualty of that was that our friend Al Lizama, who who is a field archaeologist and really taught me a lot about the burials and the significance of our burials. Al was also arrested at the federal court because he made a comment. He was asked, what's that in your pocket, as we went in for Angel's a case. And he just uttered, nonchalantly, oh, it's a grenade. But he got arrested right then and there. And he spent more time in prison, federal prison, than Angel. I think his was about a year. Angel was about 6 months. But what is so sad about Angel is that really his demise, I believe, began in prison when he had a toothache or so. We believe that he succumbed to some impossible ailment that could have happened to him. And the man struggled all the way. I visited him at the hospital before, a couple of days before he passed. And William Hernandez and I, prayed with him. But Angel is our hero. He did so much, left so much inspiration for our people. And I think we should not forget him. I think, I don't know about the negative stuff because I knew Angel when he and Bennett Dunca put together Nacion Tomorrow, and I was invited to go and raise and manhula up at Ed Benaventi's house. We did that, and I was one of the founding people for Nacion Tomorrow. But he camped out to make sure Tomorrow Land Trust lands were implemented, and that the people, and that's the sad thing, is that we really need to work. Somebody uttered to me the other day, why can't we just give out 500 Tomorrowland Trust leases and get that done and over with? What is with the Tomorrowland Trust lands, and why is this happening? What is all this delay about? Our people are suffering out there. The numbers of homeless, over 1,200 people. This phenomena is new to us. I didn't see this in my young days. I didn't even see it when I was a senator 20 years ago, but now it's so prevalent. It's our people again. When you look around in any colonial situation, it is the indigenous people that suffer in many, many ways.
Sí, this maasi Auntie Hope. I think, you brought up so many important points, and I think to that question, it's really important for people to remember that every day is an opportunity to change our mind. That even if your family, to the person who asked the question, even if your family may have seen Senator Angel Santos in one way in the past, as they come to understand our situation, as we all come to understand our situation, every day we learn new and new things that will change our mind about things and help us understand things better. And I think a lot of the activism and a lot of the education and a lot of the efforts of the women we heard from tonight have helped us to do that. I think it is always important that we recognize that we're all people, right? And that every day is a new day to learn and to grow. And I hope that this panel has, given everybody this opportunity. We of course are independent Guåhan, so we really believe in the fact that our people deserve sovereignty, deserve a say in all decisions that are made for us. And I think that's what it boils down to. We saw some comments tonight about, well, those of you who are pushing for independence, what are you going to do when the US leaves? You're going to miss the US, you're going to miss US money. And, these are things that I think the decolonization process answers, and that the more we learn about the decolonization process, the more we come to realize that it's absolutely natural for a place that has been colonized to desire freedom and to fight for it. And that over 80 places in the world have successfully decolonized and achieved independence. And many of them have done so with positive relationships with their former administering power, who has an obligation, having created the dependencies really to ensure that the process towards independence is smooth and that people, you know, are able to do so in a way that ensures that their social, economic ways of life are maintained. And so that, of course, is another conversation for another time. We had some really quick, easy questions I'd like to get out before, you know, the close. Someone had asked if we're having another independent Guåhan concert this year. We are. It will be televised again as it was last year. So please tune in to both this Facebook page and our Instagram page for more information about that. Another person had asked if there are books where you can learn about Litekyan, and there is. Actually, the University of Guam Press published the award-winning Linatla, Portraits of Life at Litekyan, which can be purchased at any local bookstore, from the University of Guam Press, from the UOG Triton bookstore, on Amazon. So yes, please look for that book. Much of the Flores family stories are found in that book, as well as a lot of the stories of our earliest ancestors. Not many people realize this, but Litekyan is one of the only places in the entire Marianas Archipelago where every single period of human history can still be found. And so some of our earliest ancestors left signs of their life there for us to learn about. And so all of that is contained in that book. You know, we truly believe that sovereignty will also allow us to protect spaces like Litekyan, like Magua, like other spaces that are currently threatened by the construction of the live fire training range complex, which is also teaching us the limitations of our political status, that, you know, if the rest of the island is, you know, not allowed to destroy trees that have grown for hundreds of years, like our lemai and our ifit trees, then, but the military can destroy hundreds of them to build a range, or if, you know, we want to protect our sacred burial sites and our ancestors' remains, we can't do that currently in our political status, because every action, whether it be community actions through protests, whether it be resolutions from our legislature, whether it be letters from our governor, have been ignored, and construction has continued. And so I think at the end of the day, this always comes back to decolonization as the solution. And I think that's one of the things I've always really respected and admired about our panelists tonight, is that we, you know, they have all drawn that parallel, that in order for us to truly get our lands back, we also have to truly regain our freedom as a people. So please continue to tune in to General Assemblies like this one tonight. We host them the last Thursday of every month. Our next one is on Thursday, June 24th at 5 p.m. right here on Facebook Live. We also have a podcast called Fanatsu, and you can find them on Fanatsu on Facebook, tackling many interesting topics. This week we had a wonderful guest, Vince Diaz, talking about navigation. So please go and check that out as well. And Sizo Ismaasi for tuning in. Sizo Ismaasi to our incredibly intelligent and powerful panelists. And we'll see you next month. Esta, adios.
Adios.
It's just
Adios.
us.